Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us tonight as we close out the end of March with Herbal Medicine for Women, one of our Women's Month highlights. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Genessa to get us started.
All right. Thanks so much, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. As Sarah said, my name is Genessa, and I am going to be presenting tonight a great workshop for you on herbal medicine for women. So, a little bit about myself. I have been interested and involved in holistic health and wellness really since adolescence, harking back to some unfortunate chronic back pain as a teenager and really just starting to learn about the connection between mind and body and really amazing influence on myself at that time was this book that I read by Dr. John Sarno, who was claiming a lot of information around like back pain being connected to unresolved anger. And so I really started getting more into into informal herbalism from a very young age, foraged with my family for berries and mushrooms and herbs. And I spent a lot of my childhood, almost every day really, out in the forest behind my house, playing, building forts, playing with the plants and stuff. And then during COVID times, I started to feel the call to return to my love of the plants and start to spend more time in nature. And so that's when I really decided to formally start studying herbalism. And I have taken classes and studied through Chestnut School of Herbs and also worked with herbalist and midwife and MD, Dr. Aviva Ram. And so my company, the Mother Hive, really focuses on supporting midlife folks on their health journeys through educational workshops like tonight, herbal consultations, and group coaching programs. I'm just going to read a quick medical disclaimer before we dive into our topics for tonight. But basically, the statements made in this workshop have not been evaluated by the FDA, and the content is not intended to diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. So if a medical condition persists, please contact your physician or healthcare provider for guidance. And the information provided by me or my company is not substitute for a face-to-face consultation with a healthcare provider and should not be construed as individual medical advice. So thanks for bearing with me as I advance through that. Let's see if my Canva will cooperate tonight. Didn't want to cooperate because I didn't accept the fact that you were recording. So here we go. All right, so some of the topics we're going to be talking tonight is covering a little bit, just a brief intro into herbal preparations. We'll talk briefly about basic hormones, focused on women's hormones, of course, impacts of chronic stress on health and wellness, nervous system supports, sleep, and digestion as well. So to kick it off, there are so many types of herbal preparations that are really, really accessible to everyday folks that have never studied formally. That's one of the great things about working with plants and herbs is that they are, folk medicine and forms of, preparations and things for everyday folks. So there's several listed here. We're not going to talk about all of them in detail tonight, but we will cover several. All right, so an infusion is where we're going to start. An infusion is really what most people think about when they're considering making herbal tea. It's one of the best methods for really delicate plant parts and including flowers and leaves. And the steps are listed here. So you would add your dried or fresh herbs to your container, add the boiling water, and cover it for about, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. And then strain it out and enjoy. Of course, you can sweeten, etc. But you can also a lot of people don't realize you can also make a nourishing herbal infusion, which is considered like a very long infusion. And you do this by using approximately 1 ounce of the herbs by weight to 32-ounce jar, or you could use like a French press if you have one of those. And then you cover the herbs and let them steep for 4 to 12 hours. Usually I like to just leave it on the counter overnight. And then you can strain out the herbs in the morning and sip on it throughout the day. It's a really convenient way to get in lots of nutritive herbs. And you can also usually refrigerate any leftovers for up to like 3 days. So that's a kind of a little twist on making a typical tea. And we call that a nourishing herbal infusion. So next, we're going to talk about a decoction. So a decoction is really used best for more of the hard parts of herbs. I'm thinking of roots, barks, seeds, etc. And so you can see some pictured here in the background image on the slide. The steps are similar, of course. You're adding about a teaspoon to a tablespoon of dried herb per 1 cup of water, and just add as much as you want to make. So if you want to make a couple servings, add that to a pot on the stove, simmer it for about 20 minutes. Some people like to cover it, but you can also just kind of bring it to a low simmer and leave the lid off, and then strain your herbs and roots out at the end. And then another way to consider using decoctions is to add these herbs or mushrooms to soups or broths or like your soup stocks. So that's another really nice way to get in the extra servings of herbs. That's me. Next, we're going to talk about making an infused oil. Infused oils are typically what I think about for topical application and can also be used once you make your topical oil. You can also use that to transform it into other herbal products, including a more thicker consistency to make like a salve, which is really great for like dry hands and whatnot. So the steps to making an infused oil are again like really accessible. You need some basic tools. You need a glass jar of some sort with a lid, of course, your herbs. And here you can use some fresh or freshly wilted herbs. There's a beautiful picture in the background here of one of my favorites, St. John's wort, and it makes this beautiful red oil that you can see pictured. So that's a really great herb for skincare, and it's best to be made fresh. So some herbs you can use fresh, some are accessible through dried form as well. And the amounts are listed there, 1 ounce per 4 to 8 ounces of your oil. The oils, you have a lot of freedom to choose an oil that fits best for your purpose, but also for your particular skin type. But olive oil is a great accessible oil that a lot of us have lying around the kitchen. So that's a really great one as well. You can use almond oil. I like olive oil because it tends to be pretty shelf stable. Let's see. So once you add your herbs and you cover it with your oil, just enough to like fill the jar, you're going to cover it tightly. And if you are using fresh herbs, some people will put like a cheesecloth covering instead of like a tin or metal lid. So you can use that. And then you want to let it sit in a warm, sunny spot for about 2 weeks. Every time I pass it, so a lot of times I'll put it on the kitchen sink windowsill rather. I'll just kind of, when I'm doing the dishes or whatever that evening, I'll give it a good shake or a stir. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, I'll strain out the herbs. So for this, you want to use something that's very fine, like a cheesecloth will work really nicely. You might need a strainer and maybe like a glass Pyrex or a bowl or something. Make sure all of your supplies are nice and clean and sanitized and dry when you're working with oil to prevent any mold or rancidity. So once you strain out the herbs, then you can store the oil in a cool, dark spot for up to 1 year. And I use the trick of refrigerating some of my oils so that I can have them on hand and then take them out, let them sit at room temp so they come to, less of a solid consistency. And then I can either work with them or apply directly on the skin at that point. So definitely, monitor for any bacterial growth or any, off smells, etc. But those are like some really basic, accessible ways to get started with some herbalism. And if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat. And as we mentioned at the end, we'll have an opportunity to go over some of your questions and answer anything. Hang on 1 second. I think we got ahead of ourselves. I'm not sure how. Sorry about that. He's just going to back way up. I'm not sure where we skipped ahead. Sorry about that. Just going to stop the share for 1 second, Sarah. If you want to pause the recording, that would be great. Perfect. All right, so we are going to look briefly, just a little window into my holistic viewpoint on women's wellness. And one approach that I've studied a lot and that I really align with is the wise woman approach to wellness and healing, which is like an ancient form of healing tradition. And it really focuses on women, instead of thinking about what we need to remove or what is wrong with our bodies, instead thinking about more of a nourishing viewpoint, what we can add into our diet rather than removing things, taking a very holistic viewpoint and thinking about our body as an intelligent organism and, developing our instincts to work with our body to bring wellness and healing to ourselves and to our families and to our communities. I also come from a little bit of a background of yoga, so I like to think holistically about the body in terms of different layers or sheaths of our being, and that includes the physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body. So, as I mentioned, we're going to dive a little bit into hormones tonight, not super deep, but I would like to do just a brief overview to give you an idea of, what I think is happening is it's jumping on the bar. So it thinks I want to advance according to the bar rather than just going one little slide at a time. So we'll do that workaround. Sorry about that. So the hormone superhighways. There are three main superhighways in the female body, and the abbreviations are listed here. The first is the HPO axis, or hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. Then we have the HPA axis, and that involves the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And finally, the HPT axis, the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. So all of these areas of the body probably are like ringing a bell, but thinking about what are each of these responsible for and what role do they play in women's health is really important so that we can understand how our hormones impact our overall wellness and ability to adapt to stress. So we're going to look at each one pretty briefly here, but the HPO axis is first. And this is the main brain to ovary signaling loop. And in those, within that loop, it's responsible for stimulating and regulating female hormone production, as well as regulating monthly cycles. When we think about the HPA axis, this is the signaling loop that is connecting our brain to our adrenals, and it is in charge of controlling our levels of cortisol and adrenaline. So again, this is definitely going to be responsible for your stress response, but it also is part of what's controlling your sleep habits, any inflammation in the body, blood sugar levels, and of course, like much more. We'll start with the basics tonight. And then if we think about the HPT, this is the loop that is connecting our brain with our thyroid. So again, menstrual cycle comes into play, but it also impacts our energy levels, our metabolism levels, our cognitive function, memory, ability to perform at work, etc. So each of these three main super highways of hormones in our body, all of course work together and synergistic ways to support the overall function and functionality of our body to keep us going, to keep us rested, to manage our stress, to really metabolize and make use of all of the hormones that are working through our body. There is a huge connection, as I'm sure many of you are aware, between stress and hormones. So the stress is really defined as anything that's like straining or causing pressure and causing something to sort of bend out of shape. So our stress response is being coordinated by that HPA axis. And that is also, affecting our fight or flight or fawn even, right? Freeze or fawn or some of the other terms that we will often move into when we're in stress. So stress itself, right? Our bodies are designed to be able to tolerate a certain level of stress, but it's really when the stress becomes so chronic that we are not getting a chance to rest and recover from it to really respond appropriately with short spurts of stress. Instead, when we're in today's busy lives, when we're constantly in that stuck in that survival mode where we're not resting, we're not digesting properly, we're not in the parasympathetic nervous system state, we're more heightened and turned on and always like thinking what's next and what else do I have to be doing and where else am I rushing to? All of that constant load is really like our bodies are just not really designed to support that. So when that happens, that is when we sort of get this like stuck on or move into more like survival mode or some one of my herbal teachers calls it like the SOS state, like you're just in like help kind of really survival mode. So why is this so important, right? Well, the stress hormone connection is really considered like an endocrine disruptor because all of that chronic stress is kind of sending stressful signals back and forth between these information highways and really disrupting all of the quote unquote balance of our hormonal system. So there's just too much of an allostatic load where like all that wear and tear is happening to the body, it's happening to the nervous system, it's happening to the digestive system, to our our circadian rhythms and our sleep cycles. So it all comes into play. So we know that we all need to de-stress and find ways to support the body. And of course, here are some of the, common symptoms that women will report for ways that when we're stuck in that survival mode, that heightened sense of cortisol, impacting everything from cycles to sleep, increase in pain, medical conditions like PCOS and endometriosis, fertility issues, food cravings, weight, etc. So I've included here just a few half a dozen ways generally to support the HPA axis, including, doing body scans and becoming more aware of body. And by that, I mean, like understanding what are the signs that I'm going into a stress state. How can I relax the body, bring the shoulders up, back and down, right? We can focus on our breath. We can do guided meditations, anything to really manage the stress and increase our awareness of how our body is responding can be supportive. Energy management, using healthy boundaries, thinking about where we can get support, where we can cut back, where we can kind of be less perfect, right? And let some things slide so that we can focus on managing our energy to support our health and wellness. Balancing blood sugar, tracking and making sense of your monthly cycle, and also using adaptogens and nutrients. And we will talk tonight about herbal adaptogens. These are just some general ways, though, to be thinking about supporting. So next, we're going to look specifically at nervous system supports through an herbalism lens. So I'm going to be listing a lot of the different herbs on several slides. We won't have time to talk about each herb, so we'll kind of just walk through some general discussion around some of the herbs within that category, and then look at a couple in more detail. But at least it will give you an idea, I think, of like some resources and some ideas of like where to start. So here are some wonderful herbal allies for boosting the mood. Generally. So St. John's wort, that was that red oil that we looked at earlier in the slides with that beautiful yellow flower. As a tea or as a tincture or an extract, St. John's wort is like a very supportive, mood enhancing herb. We also have nettle, which a lot of people wouldn't think about as mood boosting, but it's very nourishing and has a lot of nutrients that can support just overall vitality. It's a stinging nettle, so it's a bright green plant. And when you're making an herbal tea, like it definitely has a green tinge to it, but when you make it as a tincture or an extract, it is a beautiful green color as well. So it just, has this vibrancy and life to it. Oat straw is another one. You can also use oat straw herb as a bath. And then garden sage. If we think about general herbal supports for grief, there are many to turn to. I like to also think about colors. So we were talking about the green and the vitality with the nettle. If we think about the heart energetically, we often associate it with pink or red color. So if you think about supporting the heart through times of grief, you can think about herbs like hawthorn berry, which is a red berry. You could think about rose, right, which could be either usually red or pink. And we also have some other friends here like motherwort, passion flower, lemon balm, hops, and again, St. John's wort. Motherwort, one of my herbalist teachers describes it as really designed for mothers, of course. And wort, so just translates to herb. So it's mother's herb is the translation there. And so motherwort is a great herb to turn to when you're feeling really stressed, overwhelmed, maybe a little sad, right? Just kind of like, I don't know why I feel sad. I just kind of feel a little bit of grief. Motherwort is a great ally for those times. And it's often described as like receiving a mother's hug energetically. So make yourself a cup of motherwort tea or take it as, if, 10 to 15 drops a couple times a day as a tincture. And that's a really supportive ally for grief. We have a few others here. I mentioned rose already and the nettle. A few, what you'll notice as you start to look through some of these slides is that a lot of the herbs mix and match for different purposes. So you'll see a lot of overlap depending on the energy of the goal of the herbs that you're working with, but also of each individual person in their own constitution, their own preferences, etc. So we're going to touch briefly on adaptogens next. And adaptogens is a class of herbs that are used to support and restore adrenal health and optimal HPA axis functioning. So these are often called tonics in traditional Chinese medicine or in Ayurveda. And the term itself, adaptogen, actually came from a Russian pharmacologist named Lazarev in 1947. And at the time, they were working in research to try to determine how to make their workers more productive and more resilient to the work stress and stressful conditions they were under. So it has sort of an interesting history in terms of the background of the terminology. But again, like going back thousands of years in TCM or Ayurveda, it's similar to sort of a tonic. But if you are keeping up on health and wellness these days, like adaptogens are everywhere. They're in, like, I feel like there's an adaptogen like added into all kinds of drinks and smoothies, and everyone's sort of on this adaptogen kick right now. And one of the beauties is that it can really sort of like boost up and help you tolerate more stress. So one of the most well-known adaptogens that you might have heard of is ashwagandha. And ashwagandha does come to us from the tradition of Ayurveda. It's an ancient Ayurvedic herb, and it is used as a nervous system tonic. And usually this one is used over longer periods of time. And again, it has that adaptogenic quality. What's interesting is many of the adaptogenic herbs, they sort of fall on a range or a spectrum of their energetics. So ashwagandha tends to be one that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it has a very energizing feel, but it also results in a calming feel within the person. And again, this is speaking generally and over longer uses of longer periods of time of use. But it's not one that's going to make you feel really like hyped up and, almost getting like the jitters, like an over reliance on coffee would result in, right? It's intended to keep the body calm, but give you enough energy to tolerate the stress and the demands. So the part of ashwagandha that is used is the roots. And there's a lot of options for preparations. And again, it's a very accessible herb. You can find it at, food stores, at grocery stores. I think I've even seen it like checking out at like TJ Maxx and stuff, right? Like you can find it so accessibly. But it can come as a powdered root form, can come as a tincture or as capsule. And it works really well with other like warming, spicy herbs. So thinking like gingers and cinnamons and vanilla, all of those yummy warm kind of drinks that you would want to have together. And we'll look at a recipe coming up next. But you can add it to teas, you can add it to shakes or smoothies. If you're taking it as a powder form, the caps, you can take it as a capsule, and it would be like the dose would be like 500 milligrams up to 3 times a day. And the tincture is pretty pretty significant. 40 to 60 drops is usually like 1 to 2 dropperfuls. And just as a warning and a precaution, it can occasionally, there's some room for caution with anyone that has autoimmune conditions. There's sort of conflicting evidence around, whether or not it will impact and sort of activate the immune system. And also, it is in the nightshade family. So most people, even if they're avoiding nightshades for health reasons, they can still tolerate it, but definitely best to, check with a physician. So this is the ashwagandha moon milk recipe that I was alluding to. It's very simple. You take your cup of milk, a little, teaspoon of the powdered ashwagandha, add in your spices and honey or whatever, sweetener you want to use. You could use maple syrup or sugar. I like the honey, but that's just me. And then the directions are very easy. You just warm up the milk, add your ashwagandha, stir all of your spices in, however you want to season it, and sweeten it, and give it a quick stir and enjoy. So it's really nice to drink something like this with the ashwagandha before bedtime. The moon milk meaning like more of an evening time drink, but you could definitely drink it in the morning as well. Next, we're going to look at sleep supports. And if you're like most of the women I work with, sleep is a huge concern for all of us. So what is going on with our sleep, right? We know a lot of these. We know a lot of these are problematic. I know for myself, I definitely suffer from some, lack of self-control with some of these. So lights, of course, screen time, our temperature can interrupt our sleep. Nighttime snacking or like snacking too close to, or eating dinner even too close to bedtime can kind of disrupt our sleep patterns. And of course, the big one, stress, right? Or any worries, depression, anxiety, over reliance on caffeine or alcohol or nicotine. And they are also, of course, like actual physical disruptors. People that are in perimenopause often will have night sweats. If there's been any illness, right, that could be impacting, or pain or sleep apnea often. So there's a lot of things, for us to navigate to help with our, or to cause problems with our sleep. But luckily, through the herbalism lens, we have a lot of options. Sleep is one of the areas that I find that clients find a lot of success with herbs. So if we think about nervines, I love this quote from another herbalist, Sage Papam, which is, "You cannot be restful, at peace, or properly digest and assimilate food when your sympathetic nervous system is overstimulated." So we have an autonomic nervous system, and it has two branches. The first is the parasympathetic, and that is our rest and digest phase. And then we have the sympathetic, which is that fight or flight or freeze or fawn, right? So we want to be working on that branch that's that parasympathetic, the rest and digest. And so most herbs are working on that rather than directly on the central nervous system. But we do call this kind of this class of herbs the nervines. And there are 4 types of nervines listed here: the more stimulating kind, the more relaxant, the hypnotics, and then the trophorestoratives. So we'll look at some examples of each next. So some of my favorite go-tos for drinks here: cacao, coffee, right? Tea, yerba mate. But we also have some other ones that you might not have heard of. The third bullet is eleuthero. And then we have ginseng, rhodiola, and schisandra is another one. So these are herbs that, again, have that more stimulating property, but also at the same time can kind of like help us sort of tolerate stress. Too much of anything, of course, is never a good thing. So, like too much yerba mate or too much black tea, too much cacao, right? We want to have everything in moderation. But when you need a little burst, right, of stimulating energy, or if you're a person like really needs that stimulant to kind of get your system going in the morning, right, to get your bowels going, your digestive system going, these can be some great options. We have even more to choose from for relaxants. And these will tend to be milder remedies. They can calm, they can sedate, and really relax the nervous system. So there's a lot to choose from here. You'll see a lot of mints. We have like catnip, holy basil or tulsi, lemon balm, motherwort, right? Those are all in the mint family. So those are often turned to as a relaxing. And you'll see some other friends here too, like motherwort, St. John's wort. We've talked about those. We've talked about ashwagandha. So some overlap as well. Then if we look at the hypnotics, these are herbs that can really generate a marked level of sedation, relaxation, sleepiness. And these are going to be used more in acute situations, maybe acute pain, someone that's really dealing with insomnia, perhaps even drug withdrawal or more extreme cases of, panic attack, anxiety. So these are some of the more hypnotic ones. And then the tropho-restorative class of nervines, this directly restores a worn down nervous system. So these are the types of remedies that are incredible in their capacity to directly strengthen, tonify, restore a nervous system that's been like completely depleted. If you've had long periods of stress, if you've had a lack of sleep for a long period, any history of drug or alcohol use, or if you've been suffering from, just general burnout, these would be some great herbs to research and look into. We already talked about ashwagandha. We also have borage, damiana. That's an herb from South America. We have gotu kola, which is an Asian herb. We have lavender, lemon balm. A lot of us are growing, if you have a small garden, you might be growing borage, you might be growing lavender or lemon balm. And if not, those are pretty accessible. We also have a mushroom in here, lion's mane. So lion's mane is super supportive for anything to do with the brain in general. And then you can get that as supplement in like a tincture form. You can also get it as a powder. So that's another really nice one that sometimes I'll blend in with other herbs or mushrooms. And then milky oats is a great one as well. Anytime you're suffering from that like frazzled nerve feeling, milky oats is a really great resource. All right, so we talked about a few of these, but a little bit more here on passion flower. This one's used traditionally to support sleep. Also really a good ally for anyone dealing with anxiety disorders. California poppy. This is a gentle sedative. I definitely like to have that one in a lot of sleep blends, but you do not want to take that before driving. Like make sure you're not, you take it in the evening and because it is more of that, sleepy feeling. The hops, the tincture might be a little too strong for some people for daytime use, and definitely don't want to mix it with any alcohol. And avoid the hops if you have a moderate to severe depression or history of any estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. And we talked about the ashwagandha with the nightshade. So, and then just a few others here. Valerian is another nice one that is really supportive for sleep. Of course, chamomile is a go-to for sleepy time teas. Um, and motherwort, because I work a lot with women at midlife time period, a lot of them might be having like some heart palpitations, especially at night, and or just kind of feeling like a little on the anxious side. So motherwort again is another herb to consider for supporting the heart and any kind of like palpitation. So passion flower is pictured here. It's a beautiful flower. And I do know some people have been successful with growing it inside, but it is a beautiful herb to like support your sleep. And it not only helps calm the mind and reduce anxiety, but it also has like natural sedative properties that can aid in falling asleep, staying asleep throughout the night. And it also is really great to like ease those tension headaches, promote relaxation in the muscles. So if you have any like stress related sleep disorder, that's a really good one to kind of just bring everything down, right? Like drop the shoulders and relax everything. So it has a rich history in addition to sleep benefits for in traditional medicine for a variety of other ailments. Um, so it's generally safe for most people, but it's definitely best to like check with your doctor or healthcare professional before adding any of these new herbs or supplements into your routine. And again, you can find it in a lot of different formats, so it's pretty accessible. And just some general sleep hygiene, which we won't spend too much time on now, but definitely trying to reduce those devices is one of my goals. And then there's always some great apps and tools that you can access. I love Insight, Headspace, Calm is a really great one. Any yoga nidra or yogic sleep is really great to help you do a guided meditation to lead into sleep. Digestion. So you might have heard of the gut as being described as the second brain, and our gut lining has a network of around like 100 million neurons, but it has over 35 neurotransmitters as well. And what's interesting is that approximately 95% of our serotonin is found in our intestines. So this second brain is in charge of channeling about 95% of the information coming through our gut, and that travels along the vagus nerve, which is the large nerve that runs from the brain to the gut. And so there's this huge connection between mind, body, and the gut microbiome. And there's a lot of cool research out there right now, even on psychobiotics, which is like checking to see like how can they use probiotics to support mental health. So pretty exciting stuff. So, of course, we know that stress can really have an impact on our gut health, as well as anyone that's, at the age of going through perimenopause, things start to kind of feel a little different. So, this can result in a lot of, different range of symptoms, loose stools, constipation, gas, IBS, and even damages to the gut lining can happen, which can lead to something called leaky gut. So your microbiome is super important, and I encourage you to get to know your microbiome. It's impacting your ability to absorb nutrients, your body's ability to detoxify. It affects your moods, your appetite and cravings, as well as mental and cognitive function. So when things get dysregulated, right, we would call it like dysbiosis in that gut microbiome. Um, Several things can result, including inflammation, hormonal problems, right, depression or mood problems, and brain fog. So I'm just going to skim over this briefly, but the estrobolome is something that I learned from my herbalism teacher, Dr. Aviva Ram. And this is the microbiome in your intestines that's specifically responsible for regulating estrogen levels. And the estrogen that's produced in our ovaries and some from fat cells and within our adrenals. So that the estrogen moves through the body in the bloodstream, and goes along and like attaches to all the cells with the estrogen receptors. And then it lands in your liver. And the liver is responsible for breaking down the estrogen and getting it ready to move through, the process of elimination through your stool. And as it moves through your intestines, it's meeting the special microbiome called the estrobolome. And the bacteria is able to regulate the estrogen levels through special enzymes that help break down the estrogen. So, because we don't want too much, we don't want to be in a state of excess estrogen levels, right? So, the bacteria also make the estrogen from plants in your diet through the lignans. So the phytoestrogens or plant estrogens are super important to help balance the levels by getting in there and blocking those receptors when the estrogen levels are heightened, or by providing enough to help you stay supported. So when dysbiosis is going on and your estrobolome bacteria start growing out of control, that's when you can get too much of that estrogen, which is, of course, going to impact your overall endocrine system. So this is where people really start to feel heavy, painful periods. Um, it could trigger and lead to endometriosis, maybe fibroids, mood swings, and also can, of course, increase risk of endometrial and breast cancers. So again, it's all connected to our gut and to the microbiome. So super important. Of course, we know diet and alcohol, stress and trauma, overuse of medications, especially antibiotics, and then lack of sleep or exercise are all involved in gut health. Based on time, we'll probably get through a couple of these tonight. But one of the big ones is the dysbiosis. So thinking about some of the common symptoms that you might experience with dysbiosis, there's several listed here. Got gas and bloating, fatigue, brain fog is really big, a chronic constipation, lots of cravings, right? Mood disruption. Again, we mentioned some of the factors that could influence and lead to dysbiosis, and also inflammation, right, in the lining of the gut. A lack of fiber or a lack of variety also leads, because we need the variety in the gut to create different, to feed it different components to produce different bacteria and keep them growing and healthy, right? And of course, with the antibiotics, that would be killing the good gut flora as well. So sugar is a big one to avoid if you're experiencing some of these symptoms, and then minimizing grains, focusing a lot on more fermented veggies, and getting in, coconut yogurts, kefirs, etc. Another common digestive disruptor is leaky gut. So the signs are often food intolerances or sensitivities, and some women will start to develop these as they grow older and develop a seasonal allergies, more like just skin conditions, rashes more often, perhaps even start developing autoimmune diseases. Oftentimes they'll feel really tired and have a lot of achiness and fatigue. A lot of the same old offenders here. So some herbs that can be used as foods to support with leaky gut. Turmeric is a great herb that's pictured here. It's the root. And you can also use teas with licorice root or marshmallow root. And these are, the marshmallow root in particular is very mucilaginous, so it like helps support the lining of the gut and kind of keep it like smooth and healthy and reduce inflammation. A really great approach that I love with herbalism is using digestive bitters. And having worked with a nutritionist before to like slow down and like make sure I'm chewing and make sure I'm smelling the food right. Digestive bitters is a great way to like really light up that digestive tract and like turn on the digestive juices and fire. And so you can you can make your own or you can purchase digestive bitters. But the idea is you just take a couple drops on the tongue a few minutes before eating or after eating, and it just helps support the digestive system. So there's a few herbs listed here like dandelion, burdock, orange or lemon peel. And here are some great gut healing herbs as well. We have calendula. Marshmallow leaf and root can be used. Plantain, licorice root, chickweed. I prefer that one fresh, and aloe. So the aloe is obviously pictured here. Calendula is a beautiful orange flower that you can grow, and it has so many amazing uses. And it makes a beautiful orange, bright orange um, infused oil. You can use it for tea, like pick the petals. You can eat it fresh. It's an edible flower. I grew a variety for a few years now that is almost like I forget what they call it. It's like an autumn or a sunrise kind of name to the variety of the calendula. So each of the flowers has a different hint of like orange, yellow, red, and rust color. It's just very beautiful and it's a very happy flower. So every time I see calendula, I feel a little more sunny and happy. And it's very versatile too. But I love to put in dried calendula petals into any gut healing tea blends. That's really supportive. And you'll notice that like when we get a burn, we would put like aloe on it, right? Or if you know anything about herbal first aid, you might take some plantain and kind of chew it up and put it on a bee sting or on some poison ivy rash, right? Any of these herbs are really great because they have skin healing or vulnerary properties. And so, if we think about the inside of our body, that's how they're also really healing to the gut because they're reducing inflammation. They're healing the lining of the gut that's, perhaps been suffering with slight damage from all of the inflammation and the dysbiosis and kind of the not so great treatment that we might have been giving our gut over the holidays or something, right? So all of these herbs are beautiful healing herbs outside on the skin as well as internally. Marshmallow leaf and root, I mentioned a little bit earlier. So that makes a very, when you take the marshmallow root in particular, it you can use it as a tea, but you can also find it. I imagine you can find it powdered as well. I haven't worked with it much that way, but you can also, of course, use it in a tincture form. But the tea is really nice, and it will kind of create this like mucilaginous, almost like soothing, kind of sticky soft. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of almost like the aloe. It looks almost like that when you brew it with cold water. So a lot of times I'll tell my clients to make their marshmallow root tea in tepid or cold water. Let it steep a little bit longer, close to like 20, 30, even 40 minutes, and then drink it that way to kind of keep those mucilaginous properties going. So those are some really nice gut healing herbs that again are pretty accessible and available to most, either by gardening or growing your own, or you can find aloe in several forms at the grocery stores nowadays as well. And you can, purchase most of like the calendula, the marshmallow, and the licorice dried. So another great tip as we're wrapping up for tonight for digestion is a morning lemon tea. So this is super simple. As you can see, there's not a lot of ingredients, and you can kind of tweak it to your preferences. But just having that squeeze of, some hot water, adding some fresh lemon, and you can even add fresh ginger root, or I'm sure you could even, use dried ginger root if you had that on hand instead. And then optionally, you can add honey. And you're just going to, do a couple squeezes of about, 1/2 to, you could go up to a full lemon, but I tend to do around, a quarter to a half. And let that steep for a few minutes. And sometimes I'll just leave the lemon and the ginger in the hot water and, sip on it throughout my morning routine as I'm getting ready. But that can really help increase. Remember earlier, I was mentioning some of you might be relying on coffee or some sort of stimulant to kind of get the body and the digestive system moving in the morning. A lot of us kind of get into that routine of like having a cup of coffee before doing anything else. And if you can replace it, hold off on the coffee and try the morning lemon tea, that can really help increase regularity of the bowels. And I've had a lot of good luck with just, something very simple and basic like this. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. My contact information is here. And next we will move into a Q&A session.